All right. So today's call is on human design type and gifts. I think we have a generator and a projector here with us today, and then I'm a projector. Correct me if I'm wrong in the chat. Okay, a little bit about why listen to me. I've been into this stuff since 2016. I'm a 6'2" self-projected projector, so I tend to um, find my truth in my voice and speaking. It's a little bit like a manifestor, actually. It's very interesting, and we'll get into that more. But the self-projected part has to do with using my voice to find my identity. And so I've been doing this for about 7 years, and in human design, the 7 year thing is a big deal in terms of our genetics kind of rewrite themselves every 7 years, right? Like from on a cellular level, we have that seven year cycle of cell renewal. So like our oldest cells in our body physically are only about 7 years old. So in human design, there's this idea of 3.5 years into your experiment and then 3.5 years out. And then like you've kind of been able to rewire the way that you think and the way that you see yourself with regard to your design. And so I've been in it 8 years now. Need to correct that. I've also been true to my projector form, interested in many, many systems. So gene keys, astrology, the Enneagram, Myers-Briggs, all personality tests have always fascinated me. I used to get the star scroll zodiac signs at the gas station when I was a child. I've always been interested in those things. And since 2010, I've been actively looking into ascension and consciousness expansion and self-empowerment, self-growth, and how it all fits together to kind of bring in that new paradigm that everybody seems to want to talk about. But it's a lived thing, right? It's not a place that we go. It's something that we draw in and we embody. So I'm a mom of five. In previous lifetimes, I've been a birth keeper, a doula, an artist. I used to do henna at festivals to make money back in the day. Um, and I've written a blog pretty consistently since 2005. And so that's out there as well. And I've unschooled all my kids, which gives me this kind of interesting perspective. But that's me. Okay, and if you haven't got your chart, here are the places that you want to um, find it. Oh, so, okay, so my kids. My baby is 12. My next oldest is 14, very much a teenager. So I really only have like one baby left. And then so 12, 14, 16, almost 17. Then my adult kids are 21 and 24. Both of those have birthdays in the summer. And my 24-year-old and his love just had a baby. So that baby is 5 months old now. And I just got to see her last weekend. So that was very lovely. But yeah, that's my kiddo. So we've been unschooling literally 20 years. That was one of the last articles I wrote about was 20 years worth of unschooling and just so much of unlearning and relearning that went along with that. Okay. So if you haven't got your chart, these are the places to get your chart. I like using the first app, the blue colored app down here, with a caveat. I bought that app before it was pay to play. And so I have a lot of access to things on it that I paid for once. And now it's like you have to have a subscription, but it might not matter. So I like that one. I like My Human Design. That's a newer app as well. Um, Genetic Matrix, I used to be less a fan of, but they have since updated a lot of their stuff and they have a lot more features and a lot more cool things. They also let you pay month to month, so you can get a pretty expanded look, maybe almost too much. It's overwhelming a little bit on Genetic Matrix. My body graph is very straightforward, and it lets you also have the mandala version of your chart. So it will kind of look like my background here. So it'll show you the gates relative to what signs they're in, and it's a broader view. Let's see. And then, yeah, there's also Human Design Blueprint. That's another cool one. Although the caveat with that one is Erin Claire Jones is brilliant. However, she has her stuff is AI generated. Like she's fed her writing to an AI. And so she can make you like 100-page report of your human design chart, which is great. And it's instant, but it's instant because it's AI. So, take that or leave it. I mean, AI is fantastic in a lot of ways, but it's a different kind of flavor to it. And maybe, not as personalized as a reading one-on-one might be. But these are the places to get your charts. They're great. All of them are going to be pretty straightforward in telling you what you need to know for the purposes of this call and looking into your family's charts. Okay, so this is the mandala I'm talking about. This is different gates that are highlighted in different charts. We'll get into that later. It's just a fun kind of graphic to see that this is a really detailed system. There's a lot to human design. And so we're going to talk about the 5 types. Then later in the course, we're going to get into profile, strategy, key themes, authority, the not self, which is kind of our direction of dysfunction, if you want to call it, or our conditioning, what we think we're supposed to be given our conditioning and our upbringing and what the world tells us we should be like. And there's 9 centers in human design. They're kind of like chakras, but not. And then we can go super duper deep. We're going to get into circuitry, variables, channels, gates, all of that stuff. So we're going to cover all of it. And my personal interest at the moment is in digging into the gene keys and astrology connections. So we can talk about that too. I actually have more free stuff to give you guys because I just am creating out of my own wanting to kind of visualize it. And so I have another free PDF that I'm going to release soon that has how to decode your astrology using human design and gene keys. All right. And I say renegade style because I am not classically trained in human design. And in fact, I don't think that that's even worthwhile. There are going to be different perspectives on this, obviously. A lot of the so-called original human design information is behind really massive paywalls. And it's very, very, very pedantic, logic-driven, masculine. None of that really resonates with me. So I have chosen to learn from other teachers and from other sources and kind of when I started, the reason why I started to create this course is because the knowledge started coming through me in new ways that I hadn't heard from other teachers before. And that's when I was like, oh, maybe this is my impetus to share from my own perspective, because things started, like downloads started dropping in that I was like, that's a cool way to think about it. And it seems correct. And nobody else has said this before. So that's what you're going to get here with me. All right, so first, let's take just a minute. If you need to get a drink of water, get a drink of water. If you don't have a journal or human design charts in front of you, maybe you want to take notes. We're just going to take just a moment to set the intention that we hear what we want to hear, that we're open, that we're aligned, that we're attuned to hearing what we will most benefit from in this call. And let's jump in. We're going to talk about type. Okay, so the origin of human design, it is a synthesis of multiple self-knowledge systems. You'll see there's astrology components, there's the chakra system that kind of has an influence. The I Ching plays a major part. You'll also notice the circuitry that has to do with the Kabbalah. It's a channeled system. So a guy named Alan Krakauer, who later changed his name to Ra Uru Hu, he had this mystical encounter with something that he called the voice. And this was in Ibiza, Spain. It was actually, yeah, in 1987 is when this kind of came to him. And over 8 days and nights, he wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. And that is the like original transmission of human design. He went public with that knowledge in 2001, and he passed on in 2011. So, 2011 is that in a lot of mystical circles, we talk about the split in consciousness that happened around 2011. And I think it's very interesting that Ra passed away right when that split in consciousness occurred. And so I do feel like his transmission was like the origin point. And since 2011, there's been this jumping off point where his students are kind of expanding and mutating and evolving this knowledge that he brought forth. But so it's a channel system, and that's good to know, especially, to kind of take it with a grain of salt, because a channeled system, it's not necessarily the divine voice of God or something. I mean, I don't really think there is such a thing. And so it's one source, and it can be up for interpretation. And I think it's always a great thing to put any kind of system that we're learning from through the filters of, does this feel accurate to me, to my body? Like figure out how to truth it, how to find your resonance with it. And if it doesn't resonate, maybe it's not valuable to you, right? So it's not a belief system, and it is really meant to be empowering. That's probably the place where I diverge from traditional classical human design the most, because human design, as Ra shared it, says that you have no choice. You're just a passenger in the vehicle of your body, and everything is aura mechanics, and you can't help yourself. You're like a primal animal just clunking around through life. That doesn't resonate with me at all. I feel like that might be our baseline, but obviously, knowing our baseline gives us the tools to empower ourselves to choose, to make conscious and aware choices that are in alignment with where we want to go. And so that's a little bit about that. And we'll talk a lot more about that, especially when we get to incarnation crosses later, because that has to do with life path. And traditional human design doesn't talk about it much. So our body graph this is a typical body graph. All these crazy numbers on the sides are the planets and the gates and the lines. Through the center here, we've got our 9 centers, similar to the seven chakra system with a few exceptions. The red bits in the chart, these correspond with the red gate. So like, for instance, gate 48 in Jupiter, you'll see it's a red gate here. So that's Jupiter, line 5, gate 48, and you'll see it here. So all of these red gates correspond with all these red numbers. And some of them are doubles, for instance, like the 60, they have red and black here. So all of the black gates have to do with our birthday, and that is our personality and corresponds with date, time, and place that we're born. And then our design, the red things are unconscious, and that's kind of like our body elemental. And so in other schools of thought, for instance, in Anelia Ben's teachings, which is someone I follow really closely, she talks a lot about the body elemental and our soul, that we're like a 2-part being. And I feel like human design resonates with that so well, that we have our conscious kind of soul awareness, mind programming. And then we also have our body elemental consciousness, like our embodied physical truth. And so our design is a separate thing in human design. And so we are the totality of both. Oh, yes, Anelia Benz. She is definitely one of my mentors. Whoops, I'm clicking too fast. Okay. Nope, that's actually fine. So conscious and unconscious. So types. As I said, I'm a projector. And I think we have 2 other types on the call. So here is the breakdown of kind of society, what society looks like. Reflectors are going to be the least common, followed by manifestors, then projectors, then manigens and generators. They're about 35, 30, 34, 36. It's in there. Both manigens and generators have a defined sacral. And so they're kind of, they're different flavors of the same type in a way. They're both generator types. And so I abbreviate manigens. And it's important to understand that we're all kind of wired to work in very different ways. We'll get into that a lot more as we talk about the centers. The sacral center is the defining piece of either a generator or a manigen. And it's like a subtle difference, but the more we dig into it, the more expansive it really gets. So the 5 types in the beginning, this was something that I can't even remember where I got this reference, so I feel bad that I cannot credit it to the proper source, but this concept of looking back into ancient Egypt to get a feel for how these types operate in society, how our auras complement each other. So manifestors, that's that 8 or 9% of the population, they would be like the pharaohs. They wield a lot of power. They have big visions. They really have a voice and a mission to kind of engage with the world in a big way, but they don't have the consistent energy to do it all on their own. And so they need the inspiration. They need to be able to inspire the masses to kind of harness that energy, that generator or manigen energy to bring forth their grand visions. Um, Manifestors are often in historically, they're in positions of leadership. And it's very interesting. Like I think the first Chinese emperor was a manifestor, and we recently watched a documentary on that, and it was just fascinating because going back that far, this was maybe 4 or 5 thousand years ago, and like the massively grand visions that this man brought forth that still stand today, like the terracotta army, that's a manifestor's vision right there. Big, bold, lasting, right? And, but it's important to keep in mind, these are the archetypes. You might very frequently meet manifestors who don't feel aligned with that at all. And so we'll get into that as we keep going. So in ancient Egypt, they had priests that were kind of the advisors to the pharaoh. They would also advise anybody who came to them for any kind of guidance or insight. They had very good awareness about what others should do, but they weren't that talented at knowing what they themselves should do. This was the role of a projector. So projectors are the guides of the masses, but in order to keep the projectors from being like so powerful, uh, we tend to not be able to see ourselves clearly or to know what advice to give ourselves, where we can be great at guiding others, but we need some kind of either another projector or the feedback, the interplay of within relationships to really know what's right for us. Um, and then the workers that accomplished so much by working together under the direction of the pharaoh with advice from the priest, those were the generators and manigens. Now, you might notice a little detail about this story. Most of those people were enslaved. They were doing things maybe not fully in their own power. Probably some of them believed in the pharaoh's vision, but maybe a lot of them felt like they'd been waylaid a little bit and kind of got conscripted, or maybe were forced into this work very blatantly. There's that whole gamut of things. And so generators, they have this beautiful access to consistent life force energy, but uh, in the past, and sometimes even now, things like demanding bosses or particular kinds of jobs, they tend to harness that generator's energy and keep them from doing what they want to do, what they feel aligned with. And that is where the trouble can come in for generators and manigens, when they feel like they have been co-opted from their personal mission, because generators are here to help people and help causes and make things happen with that beautiful energy, but only for things that they truly, genuinely believe in. And so that's the caveat for manifestors and manigens. And then finally, um, things like the Oracle of Delphi, those big those people who had that big vision, but they were very uncommon in society, right? Um, People that turned to the Oracle, they wanted, big answers like, what is the impact of the eclipse going to be on our civilization? This is the kind of questions that they would bring to an Oracle. And this is the similar thing with a reflector. Reflectors are really, really good at um, kind of discerning the overall environment of groups. They're like the canary in the coal mine. They notice things. They're very attuned to their environment. They're very tapped in. And this is kind of a double-edged sword because it makes them both very powerful, but also very vulnerable. And those are the 1 to 2% of the population, those reflectors. They're also very kind of tapped into nature. You would think that maybe the reflectors are the original type, like the OG. In fact, projectors are the newest ones, and reflectors are they're almost like a template of what humanity was before civilization came around. Very attuned to nature, very immune to cultural and psychological manipulation and nonsense. They're kind of less susceptible to conditioning than the rest of us, or they may be overcome by it. It just depends on their environment. So that's kind of an overview of what that kind of thing looks like. All right, so auras. In human design, we talk about aura mechanics, and that really has to do with um, physically how we feel around people. And then I'm also noticing that as we connect more and more online with people, we do tend to, those auras somehow are going through, like it doesn't have to be in someone's physical presence anymore. Where we have, for instance, my cycle is synced with my best friend who lives 3 hours away that I never see, but I talk to her almost every day. And, how does that happen? It's very interesting, right? But we have these subtle kind of connections that are going even through the screen, through the internet. Um, and so the mechanics of our auras, they function differently. And so generator and Gen auras, they both have that defined sacral. So this is like a base generator chart where they've got the defined sacral, and then a base Gen chart, they have a defined sacral, they have a defined throat too. And so in both cases, that defined sacral aura, it feels like warmth and like a nice cozy hug, like blankets by the fire and marshmallows and a cup of cocoa. It's warm, it's enveloping, it's magnetic, it wants to draw you in. Ideally, that's the way that generator aura is going to function. A projector aura, projectors can be any kind of combination of centers, except they never have a defined sacral. So these guys are kind of opposites, right? Um, the projector aura feels like a spotlight. It's focused, it's targeted. We tend to do better with one-on-one interactions. My kids have commented on this my entire life. They're like, Mama, you get so distracted when we're all trying to talk to you. Yes, I do. I'm sorry, guys. And so it's been and it's been a concerted effort for me to make time to speak with my kids one-on-one to make sure that they feel heard and seen by me, because I'm not so good at managing the collective all in once. Generators tend to have a better handle on that. The other thing about defined versus undefined sacral has to do with boundaries, especially boundaries of the self. Generators have a little bit of an edge on projectors when it comes to knowing what to do and actually following through and doing it, to take care of themselves, to say no when it's appropriate, to avoid overgiving. And these are just generalizations, right? There's always going to be gates and lines and other things that are going to factor into that. But generally, the sacral is about boundaries, and specifically boundaries that pertain to the self. So manifestor and reflector auras, the first thing to notice about manifestors, they have an undefined sacral and always a defined throat. So no sacral, yes throat. And then the reflector aura has no definition. There are no centers that are defined. They do have gates though. And that's where it really gets interesting with reflectors. Manifestors' auras are closed off. Remember, I talked about that warm, magnetic enveloping of the generator. Manifestor auras are kind of abrupt. They are very good at kind of having these walls that keep out people who maybe they're not aligned with, or it'll take them a while to warm up. It'll take them a little while before they're willing to like bring down that drawbridge and welcome you in. And I have amazingly warm, funny, insightful manifestor friends, but also there's a running joke, if you text a manifestor, you might get an answer in 4 weeks. Like they're not super fussed to make sure that they reconnect, because they've got that closed off aura, because they're very protective of their own energy. And then a reflector aura, it's such an interesting thing. This is one of the things that came through as a transmission, because my youngest child is a reflector. And so I have spent a lot of time learning about reflectors in an effort to understand him. I'm so glad that I learned the human design system when he was just 4 years old, because knowing that he's a reflector has made so much of a difference in how I parent him specifically. And incidentally, his best friend is a manifestor. There are, interestingly, a lot of similarities between the manifestor and the reflector, because you would think with all this openness that reflectors are kind of at the mercy of everybody's stuff and they can, take on a lot of conditioning, but that's not always the case. Sometimes, because of all that openness, it's the opposite. It's like they're more resilient, they're more adaptable, and they are more willing to hold their own boundaries. So the image that I came up with to describe this aura was a matrix of bubbles. Bubbles are ephemeral, they're soft, they're, there and then gone, right? But if you have a whole matrix of them, if you blow lots of bubbles and they all kind of connect, and then they make that kind of honeycomb structure, and they get really strong and solid. Think about the foam that they use for insulation in houses. That stuff is solid. You can't break through the barrier, and there's like that trapped air. And so we think of it as something really soft, but in fact it's one of the most, like, when we look at tensile strength, it's really, a very strong, very resilient, adaptable thing. So there's like flow but rigidity within that flow. So that's the reflector's aura. Reflectors are really interesting. I know a few adult reflectors, and they're so good at being chameleons, but they're always very, like, there's a groundedness to their energy, which is similar to the manifestors, is what I've noticed. Okay, so energy types and non-energy types. Basically, what we're talking about here is whether or not someone has a defined sacral. In human design, there are actually 4 motor centers, but the main one is the sacral. And so I drew this chart with 2 centers defined. I just picked a random one to define it. You'll notice it's defined via the 214 channel. In order for any center to be defined, it needs a connection to another center. So this is like circuitry, if you think of switches. So there's an on switch here, but unless it has another on switch to connect to, neither of these will light up. And so you can have as few as 2 centers defined or as many as all 9, but you'll never have just one center defined. So as I said, 70% of the population has a defined sacral in human design, and that's going to be your manigens and your generators. So this defined sacral is such a powerful center. I could honestly spend about an hour just talking about the sacral center and what it does and how it operates. It brings us consistent creative energy, right? It's the center that's associated with our reproductive organs. So like our womb, our ovaries, right? There's creative, generative life force there. And it's in response to life, whether that's people or environment or circumstances. A response kind of bubbles up, and that is what how the sacral operates. So do we want to give our energy to this? We feel a response, yes or no. And it feels like a buzz, like an energy of action, of I joke about this because my two of my defined sacral folks in my family, they have a habit of, when they're focused on something, their leg is bouncing. They do like a nervous bounce, like a twitch. And I'm like, oh, there's that sacral buzz. They can't stop. They have so much energy. They got to go all these different directions at once. And so but it's this very magnetic energy. And so opportunities are consistently coming to the energy types, and the opportunities that show up, it doesn't mean you have to say yes to everything, but it's an opportunity for you to respond with your sacral. And that would be either, I mean, sometimes you'll say, hey, do you want to go to lunch? And a divine sacral person's response might be to stand up or to go grab their bag, and they're ready. They're like responding, ready to take action. Or they might kind of flop down in their chair and go, I don't know. That's also a response, right? But it's like, it's in the moment. And it maybe they weren't even thinking about lunch, but someone came with this invitation for them. And so as we talk about the other types, we'll notice invitation is a theme, and it has to do, it's a little bit different for projectors and for the energy types, the manigens and generators. So the non-energy types, so that's 30% of the population. This is our manifestors, our projectors, and our reflectors. Basically anybody who has a white sacral center, whether or not there's gates active, right? And the thing with all of the open centers, white or undefined, so open means no gates, Undefined means there's gates, but it's still a white center. It's not connected to another. And the thing with all of our centers that are undefined or open is that they borrow energy from other people. This is why human design is such a big deal of connecting with other people and why it makes so much sense for families. Because if you have one person in your family, in your household that has a defined sacral, and all the other people in your household are non-sacral, non-energy types, that sacral person might feel a lot of burnout because they have so many people kind of amplifying and reflecting and borrowing that life force energy that is consistent in them. This is something I have to be aware of with my husband, who's a generator, because my non-defined sacral will want to kind of latch onto him when he's home and go, hey, so I have all these ideas I need to talk about. Because for me, it's talking, it's the defined throat. And that comes through as me wanting to borrow that sacral energy to talk about all the things. And, but after he's been at work for however many hours and then struggling in traffic, he might not have that extra energy to give. And those boundaries of the defined sacral show up really beautifully where he can say to me, hey, I know you want to talk about this, but I need a little bit. Can you give me some time to decompress? And I'm like, oh, right. Yes, of course. And we can communicate through that clearly to respect each other's energies and each other's ways of functioning, knowing that they're very different. So knowing when enough is enough and maintaining our boundaries is really, that's the big tricky thing for anybody who has a non-defined sacral, anybody who has, who's a manifestor, a projector, or a reflector. And sometimes when I tell this to folks who are those types, but they have one of these other centers defined, this is our ego, our emotional center, and our root center. These three are the lesser motors. And if you have any of these defined, even if you have a white sacral center, you have kind of a lesser motor that's activating you. And then also, a lot of us live in our not self a lot of the time, meaning we can be super energy types and we can reflect and amplify that energy so much. We can look like generators and mani-gens, even though we're non-energy types. But what the difference is, it's like the tortoise and the hare in the proverb. We run out of steam about a third of the way through the race and we need to take a nap. Or we might not even be conscious of it. And then we have some kind of health challenge come up that makes us stop. And so the consistency is key. And that's really the big difference because we can go hard and we can go hard for a long time. And we can maybe even have the appearance of a generator or a mani-gen for a limited amount of time. But sooner or later, the non-energy types, they're going to hit that wall of, oh boy, I've done too much and I need to go hermit in a cave and like reconfigure my energy because that's not our natural way of being. We're running on borrowed energy, literally, and that can be confusing, especially for people who are maybe working in the corporate world, because corporate world is all about consistent energy, and it's also very just do it kind of energy, which that's a manifestor's thing. It's actually not, none of the rest of us are wired to be initiators like the manifestors are. But again, we'll talk about more about that later. But yeah, keyword for the sacral or the, whether it's defined or undefined, is boundaries for the self. And so we talked about 4 motor centers: the ego, the solar plexus, and the root. They also give some kind of generative energy. It's not the same, right? They have different correspondences, like the sacral corresponds to our womb and our ovaries. The solar plexus has to do with our emotions. Our ego has to do with our willpower, and our root has to do with pressure, especially pressure to like succeed in the 3D world, the material world, right? So like basics of having a house and having enough money or food, those kind of things, right? Having like consistency and stability in our 3D world. The ego also has to do with the 3D world, self-preservation in terms of like the tribe, which is our family or maybe our extended group of friends, etc. So the solar plexus is actually the most powerful motor, even though the sacral is our main one. The solar plexus is very, very powerful, but it's like it's new. Does that make sense? It's like a baby because our collectively, the human race is figuring out how to deal with having emotions and feeling our emotional wave and understanding what it is like to be a conscious and empowered emotional being rather than being like a 2-year-old having tantrums, right? And um, so the solar plexus is very, very powerful, but it's not the main motor for that reason. It's like it's our newest center that has come online, and we're still kind of figuring out how to be emotional beings. Yeah. Yes. Agota says, I am a projector with the other 3 motors defined, and I can do huge amounts of work, but afterwards need a month of napping. That's it. Yes. And so yeah, that's why either a projector or a manifestor who has some of these motor centers defined might need less rest or downtime than a classic non-energy projector. There's kind of the myth or the stereotype of projectors are sleepy, and plenty of projectors out there do not relate to that at all because we're so good at amplifying the energy of others, the sacral energy of others, and also because maybe we have some more defined motors. All right, let's see. I'm gonna check where we're doing on time. Okay, I gotta go a little faster, y'all. All right, so we're into gifts. Good, good. Okay, so the manifestors are actually the oldest type. That's that 8 or 9% of the population. And then the generators and manigens together, they make up 70%. So manigens are a subtype of generators. And what that means is they're kind of a hybrid. The manigens have the abilities of manifestors and also the abilities of generators. It's very interesting. Although sometimes that can show up as a gift and sometimes it can show up as a little bit challenging. It just depends. And so, yeah, manifestors always have that defined sacral. Sorry, generators always have that defined sacral. And manigens have a defined sacral and a connection from the throat to one of the motors. So this is the tricky part to figure out manigens, because we'll say, well, I have a defined throat and I have a defined sacral. Why am I not a manigen? If that throat is, say, only connected to the ajna or the head, you're not a manigen. You have to have a connection from the throat to a motor center. So one of these 4. And that, because it has to do with giving voice, giving manifestation power, right? Because the throat is our manifestation center, giving action to it, whether it's willpower or emotional power or drive, or that sacral energy. So that's the throat connection. And then the manifestors, they have a connection to one of these lesser motors from the throat. They've got that willpower to speak things into existence, right? Abracadabra, but they don't have the defined sacral. And so they're going to be feeling like they're supposed to act like a generator, but in fact, they also are the part of the ones, the non-energy types that need more rest and that need to take breaks and that need to go through periods of boredom where they feel kind of a little bit out to sea, lost, and they're waiting for that next inspiration to come through. Let's see. So generator gifts. All right. And I've just got some random interesting charts here. I believe that's my son's chart. Yep, it's my son's chart. I have a projector, a generator, a manigen, a generator, and a reflector. I have everybody in my family, except for the manifestors. So generators who can relax and respond to life as it unfolds instead of striving to initiate, instead of trying to copy the manifestors, right? You'll find the right people and opportunities. They'll come to you, and in your genuine responses in the moment, you'll be able to hit that satisfaction, which is the signature theme of a generator in their power. So satisfaction. And then the not self, the signature feeling of the not self generator is frustration. So you'll feel frustrated, whether it's, somebody just asks you, hey, how's life going? Frustration is going to be a key theme that shows up if you're kind of out of your power versus just feeling a satisfaction with life and with everything, the way it's going, and just you feel very satisfied. So these are the signature theme and the not self. And so generators Since they have a defined sacral, they're going to have either a sacral authority or an emotional authority. This is what I meant with the most powerful center is the emotional authority. But again, an emotional generator versus a pure generator, a sacral generator, they're going to be very different in the way they function, in the way they make decisions. So generators' talent is to perfect their gifts over time and to live and surrender to the moment. So my kiddo, my 14-year-old here, one of his things that he really enjoyed doing was he loves to work with his hands. And he at one time got this idea that he wanted to learn how to do Rubik's cubes. And so he'd watch videos on how to do it and he'd fiddle with it a little bit and then he'd put it down. He's like, I just can't figure it out. I'm bored. I don't get it. Stupid anyway. You know, he'd get mad. And then, but I'd encourage him to like stick with it because that's his gift as a manifester is to stick with something and work through those plateaus where you feel like nothing is working. And then eventually you'll hit a breakthrough and you'll be able to be like, oh, I have some new information or, oh, I have a new idea. I haven't tried it that way. And you'll have like a jump forward in your ability. That kid is a speed cuber now. He knows how to do all kinds of like he can solve a Rubik's Cube in under 2 minutes. I don't know how he does it, but he has been consistently giving his life force energy toward learning that skill over time. And he's been able to hone it. And in the, day to day, he judges himself for like, oh, I mean, I don't know if I'm getting better or I don't know if anything's really coming of this. And so, my role is to encourage him and say, no, 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 like stick with it. It'll get better. Like your gift is to be able to transform these things over time. And at some point you'll look back and you realize how far you've come. So yeah, emotional generator. So the emotional authority means you have a defined emotional center, Megan. So we're going to talk all about authority soon. So you have like the top tier authority. About half the world is an emotional authority and the other half isn't. You guys function very differently than the other half. So we'll talk about that more in the authority call. And so, yeah, the generator gift is things are always coming to you and you always have that consistent energy to keep perfecting your gifts, to stick with things and see how they mutate and transform with the presence of your consistent sacral energy. So it's like you might not notice it in the day to day, but when you look back, you'll go, wow, I've come far. I have a good friend of mine. She is a 3-5 generator. She's in her mid 50s and she has been working on her business since I met her, so probably 15 years. And she was like a newbie, working out of, she's bootstrapping everything, barely making it. Like, do I have enough money for groceries? She's consistently at 6 figures now. Only recently, only maybe in the last 2 years, she's really like made it. And she's a big name in our local area. But it's like we've seen this gradual sticking with it energy that she's come to me with frustration of like, oh, nothing's working. And then, but she sticks with it and she keeps going and she trusts the process. And that has been, this beautiful kind of externalization of seeing her claim her power. And it's been this very like incremental action over time. And so, yeah, consistent stamina and energy to do the things that they love and that they find valuable. See, here is a very open generator chart. There's only 2 centers defined. Can't remember who this person is, but but yeah, there is a commitment energy, follow through, stick with it. And so one of the things, one of the caveats for generators is they're likely to quit things too soon because they feel like nothing's working. And so they want to just, throw it aside. I didn't have instant results. I'm just getting rid of it. And that challenge to kind of stick with that nurturing energy and trusting the process, really, and sticking with that follow through. Yeah. Yeah, manifestors and mani-gens too. They're not interested in just sticking with it. And in fact, they need to be honored in what they might perceive as flakiness, like quitting or dropping things, but that's their process. They know very quickly whether or not something is right for them to engage their energy with. And so that can be one of those things. Yeah. And I think a lot of times it's that response, right? Because a generator who doesn't have the emotional authority, they're going to kind of know. Um, if they don't know now, ask them again later. And it's very much a yes, no, this or that kind of response. Whereas an emotional generator, they've got to feel the flow of their emotions, and it's a totally different way of making decisions. The key phrase for an emotional generator is there is no truth in the now. So you really want to feel it out and stick with it, and maybe your decision will change, and being okay with that, right? Instead of judging yourself as like, oh, I should know instantly. Well, not everybody's wired to know instantly. All right, let's see. So Mani-Gen gifts, as we talked about, they're a synthesis of the two types. This is a 5-1 Mani-Gen. Don't remember whose chart this is either. They have a completely open emotional center. So think about the reflective and amplified energy there. A lot of times people with a lot of openness or maybe no gates defined in their emotional center, they're going to have very big empathy, right? They're going to feel what others feel, and it's going to be a very big thing. And if they don't know, if they're not taught that, hey, maybe that's other people's stuff, maybe it's not your stuff. And so teaching folks with that openness in their emotional center to kind of check in and go, is this mine or is this somebody else's? That can be very impactful for them. So this person, they have the 41, no, 40, is it 4521? Okay, got to move my little windows around. I have a tiny screen. So the 4521 connection. So the ego is that lesser motor center, and then they've got the defined throat. They also have connection from the G center to the defined sacral, but notice there's no direct sacral to throat connection, but they're a Mani-Gen because they have the motor to throat and the defined sacral. So the Mani-Gens kind of carry that ruler energy of, I want what I want and I'm going to go for it. But they also have that beautiful pull, that magnetic energy of the Mani-Gens. And so they are actually built to relax and to respond to life. Sometimes this can feel like a contradiction because they want to go, but they should wait. And they want to create and manifest and initiate, but they're meant to relax and respond. And so sometimes Mani-Gens can feel this kind of dual energy, and that can be a little bit challenging for them. My daughter is an emotional Mani-Gen. That is especially challenging for her because she wants to go fast, but she's an emotional authority, so she needs to wait. And yeah, as we have the same kind of the authorities for Mani-Gens and generators, it's either going to be sacral or emotional, depending on whether or not you have that emotional center defined, the satisfaction versus frustration. And then the Mani-Gen, the strategy for them is going to be to respond to life, but also to inform, to let people know what's going on with them. And we'll talk more about that in strategy and authority call, but it's a little bit different in terms of these folks that want to have a big impact and go fast and do things. Sometimes there can be this energy of like rushing forward without discussing it with those who their decision will impact. And that can be challenging for those around them. So Mani-Gens, a lot of times they're the kids that they're just go, 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 and they're going to do their own thing. And, you turn around for a second and you come back and wow, they've, come up with a whole new play strategy or something they're interested in. They've abandoned this project and jumped to two new ones. That's a very common thing for Mani-Gens. And so they can kind of sometimes judge themselves for being flaky, which is not actually, that's a judgment. It's not really accurate, right? So Mani-Gens have the gift of efficiency. They know how to skip steps and do it correctly. Whereas a generator, it's really beneficial to like go through the method and stick with everything and give everything its due diligence. Mani-Gens are going to look at the whole blueprint. Let's say they're going to, pull out the directions from the IKEA furniture, glance over it, and skip right to step 4. And they're going to be able to do that. That's going to be functional for them because they have this gift of being able to adapt and figure out how to accomplish things with efficiency. Mani-Gens are very energetic a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times. They can be very multi-passionate. They have a lot of interests. And the word, what is that? Multi-potentialite, where folks just they can't settle to one thing. And I know my daughter who's 16, she judges herself for like, well, I don't know what I want to do. I want to do everything. And it's like, well, that's okay for now. You've got to, maybe stick with something for a while and be okay with letting it go and, don't judge yourself for that, right? Manifestor gifts. Let's see. Oh, sorry. Catch the recording. Bye, Megan. So manifestor gifts they're the ones that are meant to just do it. They are the vision holders who manifest reality. Manifestors are the non-energy types. They have that open sacral or undefined sacral, but their throat is always defined, and it's going to be connected to one of these other motors, either the solar plexus or the ego. Manifestors are independent. They value their freedom. They have this gift for impacting other people, whether or not they intend to. It's just kind of the energy they carry. People can't help but notice them and go, wow, and kind of process that energy through their life. So they are natural leaders, but they may not embody those qualities, because a lot of times manifestors from childhood are they're very often kind of told that they're too much and that they need to like reel it in a little bit, bring it down a notch. And so that can be very challenging for manifestors, especially if they're raised in an environment where they're meant to kind of do what they're told and follow the leader. Manifestors don't like to do that. And so it can be very challenging to have a little child that you want to guide, and they come into the world with this ruler energy of I'm in charge. Why isn't everybody following my lead? And so sometimes it can be challenging to have a manifestor child. And also their not self signature is anger. They get very upset. And often they want freedom. And if they feel like inviting you into their world and their ideas is going to restrict their freedom, they're gonna kind of want to move alone. They're gonna want to be secretive maybe, or just do things without asking. And so it can be very, kind of stereotypically challenging for parents to have a manifestor kiddo who is so driven and emboldened and wanting to make things happen on their own. And so partnering with the manifestors can be very, very helpful. Oops, did I miss one? I did, yes. So manifestors have a gift for planning, strategy, and efficiency, and they don't always want to wait for other people to help them, or they'd rather do it by themselves, right? And that manifestor aura is powerful. It wants to push itself outward. It wants to kind of just stand in its own power. Remember that visual of the castle, right? And they're very creative. They're very driven and inspirational to other people, whether it is in a repelling way or in an attracting way. Manifestors have this grand impact on others just by being themselves, and they might not even notice it. They're just doing their own thing, moving through life, and they inspire other people in very big ways a lot of times. So a manifestor's strategy is to inform and initiate. They're the only ones that are designed to just do it, quote unquote. And they can have a couple of different authorities, but their signature when they are in their power is peace. They're meant to feel this deep, peaceful satisfaction with everything. But if they feel that their freedom is limited and that they can't have the freedom to create, they can't have the autonomy to do the things that they want to do, to initiate in ways that feel good to them, that's when they can fall into kind of anger or even apathy, kind of bitterness. And so those are the gifts and the challenges of the manifestor. Then we have projectors and reflectors. They make up about 20% of the population, projectors do. They are the newest type, only starting to appear in 1789. So we're the new kids, the projectors. Projectors can have almost any configuration of centers, but they never have a defined sacral. And they also don't have a motor to throat connection. Like I have a defined throat, but it's connected to my G center, which is not a motor. It is the center of identity. So it's a different kind of energy entirely. It doesn't have that drive, that motor active function. Then reflectors, you can always tell a reflector chart instantly because it's going to be all white. So they're going to have gates that are active, and they're the only type with what's called a lunar authority. In other words, based on the moon transits. The rest of us have solar authorities, which are centers that are defined by the sun and other planets. But if there's a chart with no defined centers, that's going to be a reflector. And the consistency that a reflector has is found in the movement of the moon transits through their chart, which activates different gates. And so it's like they have a consistent cycle over time, over about a month's time, right? The lunar cycle. So they reflectors have this kind of serene way of being before the power over others agenda started to become a big player in the world. Reflectors are actually the oldest type. And so they have like a core, like a foundational blueprint for what humanity can be like without all these kind of push and pulls of other people. So projector gifts, we are meant to be the emerging leaders of the new paradigm. No pressure, right? Projectors have a gift for mastering and improving systems. And we have this deeply penetrative aura. We can see very clearly into other people. We tend to be diplomatic. We tend to notice details that others often miss. And but as much as we are able to be attuned to the other, we don't always see ourselves very clearly. And also, our many gifts and talents are not always well received if we don't follow our strategy, which is wait to be invited. This is a very difficult thing for a projector because a lot of times we know something and it looks so obvious to us and we just want to say, but why don't you do it this way? But that that input is not necessarily welcomed by other people who are doing their own thing and maybe haven't recognized us as someone who can help them or whose help they want. And so that's the challenge of a projector is we can see very clearly and in depth about a lot of things, but we may have that challenge of kind of inserting ourselves prematurely instead of stepping back and doing our own thing and waiting for others to recognize, hey, I think you know stuff that I need to know. Can you help me? And that's when we're invited to share, oh, hey, I'm so glad you asked. Actually, I do have some insights for you. So this projector chart is my oldest son, and he's a split definition. You can see these two are connected, but they do not speak to these other two that are connected. There's like hanging gates rather than connections. So he's got defined G and throat centers, and then a defined emotional center and a defined root. So he's an emotional projector because he has that open sacral. And the signature for projectors is actually success. And we do mean success in the 3D material world view, as well as just feeling successful, feeling like we've done a successful job at whatever we choose to take on in life, whether that's parenting our children or completing an art project or having a career, whatever the thing is that we choose to apply ourselves to, we're meant to be pretty good at it, which is kind of a neat thing. But you'll notice the not self signature of a projector is bitterness. And this is a very specific frequency that comes through because oftentimes we can't help ourselves and we want to rush in with all the solutions and we try so hard. And so what sometimes happens is that we try harder than other people and we do more than other people. But if we don't wait for recognition, if we don't wait to be invited in by these other people, it's not going to land well. We're going to have resistance to all our great ideas and all our hard work, and people will just kind of dismiss us and or they won't see us or they won't invite us. And then we get bitter because we did more and we worked harder and I can't believe they can't see it. And that's when the projector aura becomes very repellent and that bitterness can creep in and it can stay for a moment or a season or a very long time, depending on how we're able to go through our emotional process and troubleshoot and get back to our place of waiting for the invitation. And especially with children, this can be very tricky. Projector kids often end up as like we're little adults, or maybe we tend to like, I think every projector child at some point in their life was called a know-it-all because we can't help ourselves but offer our solutions and our insights. Things seem very clear to us, and we want to say, oh, well, why don't you do it this way? Or obviously, this is how it's all connected. But not everybody is open to hearing our bounteous wisdom, especially when we're, 5 and we're trying to tell our parents what to do. So, so that can be some of the challenges with projectors. We do have an openness to life as projectors. We love to be recognized by those who truly see us, not see us for who other people want us to be, but see us for who we actually are. And that can be a big distinction with projectors. We also can take in and amplify the energies of those they spend time with. When I was working as a doula, I feel like my projector strengths were really helpful there because I could chameleon myself and be the kind of support person that mom and partner wanted and needed in that moment. And I was able to like put on that costume for a little while and support them as someone who they really, needed and wanted. But it was very much a putting on of a costume and then taking it off again. And that can be hard work for projectors over time. We are here to experience success as projectors for being who we are and not for doing work. This is a big thing. And work, it's one of those tricky things, right? Because if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life, right? And so that's kind of all right. Finally, we have reflectors. Reflectors are that 1 to 1.5% of the population. Reflectors tend to move through the world on a different frequency than the rest of us. They have the gift of resilience. You might think with all this openness in their chart, all this, white centers where we would take on conditioning, that they would be easily conditioned. But in fact, reflectors are uncommonly resilient. They have a greater capacity for resilience and for being resistant to conditioning than any of the other types. Reflectors are like the canaries in the coal mine. They can discern subtle changes in the environment, in interpersonal relationships, in their home, and they will either reflect or amplify these qualities. So, for instance, if your reflector child is angry a lot, who else in the family is feeling angry? Or if your reflector child is bored or sad or disappointed, what is going on in their environment that they are reflecting? And how can we change the environment? I feel like reflectors are very much the embodiment of that, the gardening analogy when it comes to children, right? We don't fix the flower if it's not blooming, we fix the environment in which it grows. And reflectors are very attuned to their environment. And this even shows up in terms of like, what color are their walls painted? And do they like the texture of their bedding and things like that? Do they feel safe and nurtured sitting in the living room with you? Like, is it a safe and nurturing and uplifting environment? And if not, how can you make it so? So a happy and healthy reflector is going to feel delight and surprise moment by moment, and they will naturally uplift other people who are present. A happy reflector kind of inspires the whole group to be happy. They create like a social gel, and in their power, reflectors are meant to kind of draw together groups of power and potency and be able to just kind of be at the hub, the center of it all, where they are bringing in connections and enjoying the delights and surprise of connecting with multiple people in multiple environments and or in a specific environment. And it really just, it flows very well. Reflectors are like activators. They make everything better in their presence, a reflector in their power. Their strategy is about waiting a lunar cycle to get clarity. And what this often looks like on a day-to-day basis is patience. having patience, and allowing reflectors their inner process to kind of take time to make decisions. Their authority is lunar, as we said. We'll talk about that a little more. And then their not self signature is disappointment. They just feel a deep kind of sadness and apathy with life if they are out of their power, if they are living in the not self. And often the way we fix this is change their environment. A happy reflector is continually surprised and delighted by life. So reflector energy, it has to do with sampling. They want to try this and they want to try that and they want to try the other. For instance, my reflector child loves to go try new restaurants. We have gone to a buffet, like an Asian grill where they have the hot pot and barbecue grill in your table. He wants to try everything. Things that I've never tried before. He's trying them. He loves to sample these things, and he can do this without losing his consistency, without like losing the core of who he is. He can try on different personalities, different voices. He's a great mimic. He's able to kind of have, adapt his language to whoever he's hanging out with. Reflectors tend to be easygoing, unassuming. They value harmony, and one of their favorite things is just to be included, to feel welcomed into having new experiences. And so, as we said, the reflector's ideal place in a group is in the center. They're the hub, the linchpin of a thriving community, and that can be the most beautiful expression of reflector energy. I have a good friend who is a reflector who I am really deeply impressed at her ability to, she moved to town, and within about a year and a half, she had this incredible, thriving, connected group of friends and support people that were there to kind of nurture and nourish her as she walked through her transition into motherhood. And it's been an amazing thing to witness as a reflector standing in her power. As I said, the chameleon of all types, the reflector has this gift of seeing things in maybe an enlightened kind of higher perspective and a limitless way of being. Often a reflector is going to amaze you with the insights that they just share off the cuff, nonchalantly, which are really kind of very impactful things. So again, I think they have that similarity with the manifestor in terms of the impact that they have on others, that they can have on others. And as we talked about, surprise and disappointment.